Hello, good morning and Happy New Year from the Italian Cultural Institute. Today we have an incredible guest, Aurélie Paradiso. Aurélie is, we say, citizen of the world, but very, very rooted in the Italian culture. She's an architect, a designer of great achievements. Thank you, Aurélie, for coming to the Stanze italiane Caminetto. Let's talk about your career. You have an incredible, successful career, but also a very good educational background. You went to Columbia Architecture, Yale Law School, Yale Architecture School. How did you, the passion for architectural design, grow into yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I was born in Switzerland to an Italian father and a Swiss mother, and we came to the United States, to New York, in 1981. And my grandmother on my mother's side was an artist. And so when I went to Columbia, well, I grew up on Long Island, and we traveled frequently back to Europe, and so I was able to spend time with both my grandparents and my families on both sides. When I went to Columbia, I studied undergraduate at Columbia. Columbia has a wonderful core curriculum program where they have you study art history, literature, and all the different humanities. And there is when I discovered my passion for architecture. It was while I was in school. I started studying the visual culture of European cities, and I had already traveled frequently to Italy and Switzerland and to other European countries. So that's really where my passion started. It was at Columbia in the architecture program there.
That's wonderful. Then you went to School of Architecture at Yale, and then you start your career. Can you tell us how was the beginning of your career, where you landed, which were your main project back then, in the year 2003, 2004, correct?
Yeah, so actually what I did specifically is after Columbia, I actually worked in an architecture firm. I worked for a New York architect named Charles Gwathmey, who was deeply rooted in sort of the modernist architectural style. And it was from there that I applied to Yale and then went to the Yale School of Architecture. At the Yale School of Architecture, that's where I met my future bosses and mentors, Todd Williams and Billy Sien. They had a firm here in New York, and they hired me basically right out of graduate school. So I went and worked for them for 10 years. And the earliest projects, actually I think one of the first projects I worked on was for Tata Consultancy in Mumbai, India, and it was a master plan. So I've really worked on a range of types of projects. So from master plan to buildings to interiors.
That's incredible. You sent me a CV which is incredible and very long, so I will just pick something here. Which one?
Okay.
One sentence really interesting is that we believe that architecture can elevate human spirit and transform our communal lives. How do you apply this concept into everyday practice?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Well, I think that my work is definitely rooted in the particular place where and in the site. So, for example, if I'm working on a new building, I don't separate the building from its location or its site, and that includes the history of the place as well. And so, and I would say the same thing for the interior projects that I do. I work on apartment renovations here in New York City, And I've worked in very contemporary buildings, but then I also recently did a project in one of the few Beaux-Arts buildings in New York City, where I really tried to maintain the sensibility of the historic framework of the building. But I think the idea is that, to answer your question more specifically, I think that because I work on two different kinds of projects. I have projects that are really more public projects, where people from the exterior come and gather. And I think that that's something that is very important. It's creating a place where people can come together and gather. And I can give you sort of specific examples of that. There's also, in the residential projects, I think it's very important where there's a different scale and there's more intimacy with the architecture, with the built environment. I think it's very important that there's a connection to the materials that are used and the details that are constructed. And for me, it's very important that those materials have a kind of authenticity to them. So I work with a lot of natural materials, stone, glass, metal.
Great. So basically you embrace this concept of sustainability into your everyday practice, correct? Are you basically oriented towards a new approach to architecture? Yeah.
You know, sustainability is a big topic in architecture, and I think there's a lot of different ways that one can approach this idea of sustainability within the practice of architecture and design. With my residential projects, I will let me talk about I recently completed this project in Bridgehampton, which is a small mixed-use retail residential. And although we didn't go for the kind of accreditation of LEED, which is one of the sort of measures that we can use today in order to become accredited as a green building, we definitely took a sustainable approach. And I think that that's the most important thing when you're designing, is it's really specific to the project. And certainly with that project in particular, there was an idea about using natural materials. There was an idea about creating a connection between the landscape and the interior, where the doors could open, and so you weren't only reliant on air conditioning and other mechanical systems, particularly when the weather allows for that connection to the exterior.
Great.
Yeah.
Architecture is never detached from creativity, and indeed you were basically, you create an art exhibition, let's go on this website, of free public kite making.
Yes.
And you won an award. That's the way I came to know I came to know you, that there was a kite exhibition nearby the place where I live, and basically you were there. So how do you basically came up with this idea of applying for this competition for kites, Aquiloni?
Yeah, so this was something that I did just a few years outside when I left grad school. So I was working for Todd Williams and Billy Sien, and I was looking to do something creative outside of the office, but that was also had a philanthropic sort of initiative behind it. So with two of my friends from graduate school, who were also practicing architects in the city, we applied for a grant from the New York State Council on the Arts. And what we presented was this idea of engaging the community through kite making, which is something that people are very familiar with. It's fun. It's actually a very simple project to do, and you can do it from 3 years old until 78 years old. Yeah, exactly. So we chose the kite so that it was accessible to all ages and all people, and then it was just a way of getting people engaged in the process of making and of building something.
And how was the result, basically?
It was amazing, actually, because we ended up engaging in partnership with the New York City Parks Department. And so they really became a partner to us. And then after we did the project for that first year, we kind of gave it to them to continue the project. And they continued to do it for several years after that.
Great. Are you working on any other project like this for engaging communities in experience creativity through design and architecture? Or?
You know, I wish I was. Right now my practice is mainly focused on, actually I work with mainly private clients, but it's something that is definitely missing.
Okay, you are a great achiever also in interior design. Yeah. And we talked before, many of your clients, they prefer Italian products for their interior setting. How do you explain this great acknowledgement that the Italian designers have towards high-end residential houses in New York City, or in the area?
Yeah. Well, I think that Italian product design, so furniture and products, have become known to be of a high standard. And there are design houses like Cassina, Peltrona, Frau, just to name a couple of them. There's many others that have stores here in New York and throughout the United States, and so they're familiar to my clients, and they're understood to be high quality. And frankly, they are beautiful. The designs are beautiful, the quality is exceptional, and so it's an easy sell.
And great. Also, you were involved with the Biennale of Venice years ago. Can you tell us the experience? What did you present, and how was basically your experience at that time, which is a very important accomplishment? Yeah,
so that's a project that I actually worked on when I was with Todd Williams and Billy Sien Architects. So they were invited, the firm was invited, and they asked me to lead the project for the 2012 Architectural Biennale. And the firm was invited to basically take over a small garden structure in the Giardini. And what we did is we ended up creating a kind of Wunderkammer, and actually Todd and Billy called it the Wunderkammer because they asked several international architects to essentially collaborate with us and participate in the exhibition.
That's wonderful. We talked before, and you said you consider yourself an immigrant, which is remarkable. You came here from Switzerland, very young. How this, let's call immigration experience, foster your creativity, if there is basically a connection between immigration and creativity?
I think there is. So I think the main thing is that, well, first of all, we came here in 1981. So I was 5 years old, and this is pre-internet, right? Pre-real globalization the way we understand it today. And so I think that having, given that we were traveling back to Europe every year to see my family, my grandparents, my cousins, I think I had a sort of unique sort of exposure to different cultures. And of course, even growing up in New York, we were exposed to many cultures because already New York was a place of diversity. But I think it was I think it's an exposure to European cities, to this idea of having exposure to the rich art history of Italy and of Europe. The street life of Italy is so important. This whole notion, going back to creating communal places, this understanding the value of the piazza in a town and in a community.
Great. So which is the experience that you did in Italy that is more, or in Europe, which is the most valuable for you in your practice, even today? Something that you remember that really was a tipping point from your creativity.
Well, I think that there's so many. Okay, I think probably one of the more important the most significant sort of cultural experience coming out of Italy is the family life. So for me, my experience growing up, there were two experiences. There was the one where I was inside the home with my family, and we always gathered around the dining table. And this is where many of the sort of family interactions took place. It was around food, it was around the table. And I think that is something, having a kind of center for the home and a place where family members and friends can come together that is inside the home is extremely valuable. And that is something that you can do via furniture, right? It could literally just be the table, but it can also be created with space. And then sort of expanding outside of the home, it's really just the experience of the piazza, which is so unique to Europe, to Italy, and it doesn't exist in the United States. And that is such an important part of communal life.
Great. Let's go to another hot topic, women and architecture. There are not too many, and you are probably one of the great example. How is this relationship with the world of architecture from as a woman, basically?
Yeah. Well, I think it's an unfortunate thing that there's just not too many women in the architectural field. In the universities right now in the United States, there's about 50% of the students are women. So it's not that women are not studying architecture, it's that they're not continuing into the practice. And that's something that I think needs to change. We need to allow more support services and resources for women to want to start their own businesses. It's tough. It's still a man's world. So it's definitely it's tough, but I think it's hopefully changing.
It's changing, and are you starting to see the change, or basically it's static? It doesn't move. Are you?
I think right now what you are seeing are. I think the needle is moving in the right direction. You are seeing younger practices with women as architects starting their own firms. Yeah.
What does a woman bring in the world of architecture compared to a man, basically?
That's a tough question. Let's see, what does a woman bring that a man doesn't bring? Well, I think women and men, we all have our place in the world of architecture, as we all have our place in every discipline. And I think that having more diversity is important so that you have different points of views, different creative processes coming together. I think when you have more diversity, you end up having more creativity because you're actually encouraging different sensibilities
And how this different sensibility is transformed in the performance, into design?
No, it's an excellent question. So really, the reality is that the design process is collaborative, and it's very rare that you find one person just being the only person who's doing who's creating the vision, doing the drawings, making the models, and then running the projects. So it really every project, and the larger they become, is a team effort. And so it's really, I think for me, when you have different minds coming together in the creative process, it's only enriching the result.
Which is your most challenging project that you have worked on at the moment?
So let's see. I think the biggest challenge that I find in the projects is when we get into construction. So I'm working on I have wonderful clients in Brooklyn right now that are building a small multifamily building in Greenpoint. And I think the toughest thing right now, and particularly in this climate, this COVID climate, is just getting buildings built to a high standard, on time and on budget.
I see. Yeah. On your CV, you have some incredible achievements here. Project in Hong Kong, Chicago, Mumbai, New York City, Washington, D.C. Which is among these projects, which are the one you are most proud for your standing point of view for architecture?
Yeah, so that list that you see there, those are projects that I worked on when I was with Todd Williams, Billy Sienna Architects, and I think probably most proud for myself of a church and community center that we designed and had built in Washington, D.C. It's for the First Congregational United Church of Christ, and actually it was a very unique project because it was a church with a office tower above it, so it was a very interesting kind of juxtaposition of programs. But most importantly, the program was to create not only a place for religious services, but a place where the community could gather. And so the main space of the project, which is what they called the sanctuary, was essentially built almost like a small amphitheater.
Great.
Yeah.
You recently, probably a couple months ago, you were a recipient of a very prestigious award from the American Institute of the Architects.
Yeah.
How did you get there, and what does it mean for you, that award at the moment?
Yeah. So I received an Archie Award from the AIA Long Island chapter for my project in Bridgehampton, which is the small mixed-use retail residential project. It was a highlight for me. I mean, I think it was, first of all, it was a tremendous honor because it was a recognition from my peers, really. So in that sense, it's just nice to be recognized for the hard work. Yeah.
Great. And
yeah.
You, among other things, you have been a professor, a teacher, an educator. You have taught at the Wesleyan University, Carnegie Mellon, Pratt Institute, New York Institute of Technology. How do you enter the classroom? What do you want to transmit to your students, basically?
Yeah. So I was an adjunct professor at Parsons, and then at the other universities that you cited, I was a visiting critic, which means that when the architecture students are presenting their projects, like instead of a midterm or a final, they invite people like me in the profession to review their work and give them feedback. So I think for me, I love to teach. It's an amazing way of giving back to the students, but I also receive so much from it because it's really about being in dialogue through the creative process.
Great.
Yeah.
And Aurélie also, Aurélie parla l'italiano. We decided to go in English because I'm more comfortable, but Aurélie, which is your, at the moment in your life, the relationship with Italy? Can you basically tell us?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So my father is Italian, and he's very involved in the Italian community and in promoting Italian culture here in the United States. And so through him, I'm still very connected to Italy, but also for myself. I think we are an Italian family, maybe an Italian-American family now because we've lived here for so long. I still go for Sunday dinners at home with my parents and my brother and his family. The Italian meal is extremely important to us. It's part of our culture. I still travel to Italy whenever I can to visit family and to sort of connect with the culture there. And then here in the US, like I also, outside of architecture, I'm an academica with the Accademia della Cucina Italiana, and that's very important, right? It's so socially, I'm still connected to Italy as well.
Great. Aurélie, which is your now big ambition, the project you dream to work on?
Yeah.
And hopes, and let's hope that it comes true, please.
Yeah, so when I was working for another firm, so I have had my own firm now for 9 years, and I've been working primarily with private clients and primarily on residential projects. Before that, when I was with Todd Williams Pilisian, and even before that with Gwathmey Siegel, I was working on more public projects. So a dream for me would be to sort of expand and have more sort of institutional cultural projects.
In the United States, in Europe, or around the world?
Around the world for sure, but I'll start in the United States. Exactly. I'll start in New York.
Wonderful. Okay, Aurélie, last but not least, you have your own practice.
Yes.
Let's talk about your office, your daily life. How do you manage basically your daily life with the clients, with your employees, and with every task that comes up every day? Now, and then, where is located your firm, basically, in the city?
Yeah, I'm located in Manhattan, and the majority of my clients are also in Manhattan, with some exceptions. So the daily life is actually incredibly regimented because while the creative process is obviously sort of integral to the project, that only represents maybe 20% of what we do. We actually provide a tremendous amount of project management for our clients.
What do you mean by project management? Can you explain this concept?
Yes, of course. So there's the design process, which is the initial stages, which are the design stages, which is kind of the creative process. And that's mainly where I spend time with the clients, and I get to understand their vision and their needs and the way that they live, or what their program requirements are for the space, if it's, whether it's an institutional client or a residential client. And that's really the design process. But then very quickly we move into having to pull together the team of contractors and fabricators and craftspeople who are actually going to build
that you pull in, you call one by one, you sit around the table, and
we bring this whole new construction team, fabrication team together, and then we actually follow the entire construction process until the end. And we make sure, step by step, we follow it and make sure that the standards that we've set forth in our documents and in our drawings is met, and that the end result is there.
Great. And basically, how do you, the daily life, how do you plan the morning, the afternoon, the evening, any time for lunch, or you basically?
I'm heavily scheduled. Actually, okay. I have a very clear schedule that I set the week before, and so I know exactly how my time is allocated. Yeah.
Which is the biggest fear in your field, basically, aside the insurance issue? A fear that you basically hope will never happen, something that can delay your work or can jeopardize your work. Which is the fear in it?
I think the biggest fear, well, for me, is I don't do a lot of marketing, so I rely very heavily on my network and on prior clients who refer me, and so the fear is always that there's not going to be more work down the line. But I think in terms of the actual execution of the projects, I think that the fear is always, mainly it's in construction. It's first of all, the construction process is the most rewarding part of the process.
Financially rewarding?
No.
In terms of seeing
intellectually and emotionally rewarding.
Great.
Because it's that's when you really see the work being realized, coming together, and then it's also incredibly rewarding for the client because now they're actually seeing it being realized, and it's exciting. Yeah.
Wonderful. So let's finish with this. A message of positivity. A young girl comes to you and said, "Aurélie, I want to become an architect." What do you tell her, basically?
Well, I think architecture, like medicine, is a calling, and it's an incredibly beautiful profession because it's a Renaissance profession. You have to know a little bit about a lot of things, or a lot about many things. So I think it's the creative process is beautiful. The interaction and the collaboration with others is really, really wonderful. I think you have to be a team player. I think you have to be analytical. I think you have to like to work hard. And you have to be passionate about the process.
In all this array of qualities, which is your strongest quality on your job, basically? The quality that brings you ahead, make people embracing your ideas?
I think that my approach is really about creating something that is extremely simple, but incredibly well-crafted and detailed with really beautiful materials and textures. And so I think I also have, actually I credit my old bosses, my old firms, between Gwathmey Siegel and Todd Williams and Billy Sien. I really learned how things were made, constructed, and built. And I think that to be a really good designer and a good architect, you have to know how things are actually made.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Grazie, Aurelia.